Welcome to Your Story, His Glory with Janelle Berker. Today we're going to speak with Penny Pfeiffer. She's here with us to give us her testimony and let us know a little bit of how God came into her life and how He's affected the way that she's lived. And we are so excited to get started with her today. Penny, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Oh, well, thank you. Um, well, let's see. I have been at Heritage for over 30 years, and my husband and I came with our two small children, which are now 36 and 34. And I'm wrong, they're 35 and 37. But we have two grandchildren, and we are just so blessed. Mark and I are just we came to this church in need of the word, and we were being filled with the word at our previous church, but we needed to grow, and we needed to be with other brothers and sisters in Christ that would encourage us and give extra boost. And we had to leave the church that we got married at, and we loved. It was difficult for us, but we loved coming, and we've been under Reggie's uh, tutelage, and he is so phenomenal. And so God has blessed our family. We've lived in Johnson City for the whole time we've been married. So that's going on 42 years.
And you retired as a teacher from a local school system here. And I know that many would say, "Oh, look, that's my favorite teacher, Mrs. Pfeiffer," because we've heard the antics that you enjoyed and made it fun for the kids there. So I know that plenty of people will be excited to hear your testimony as a result of being taught by you years ago. So thank you for coming and being willing to share. And I'm also encouraged to hear that you came to this church to hear the word and to learn and grow. And that is exactly what is still happening. I know that has kept us in this congregation because the gospel is being preached, and that not only is it being preached, it's being lived out. And we look for that for direction, and I think that it should not be unique, but unfortunately, sometimes it is. And when I've talked to people within the last 3 to 5 years, why did you come to Heritage, and why did you stay? And it was the same answer: looking for a gospel preaching church. So those that are looking to, increase their knowledge of the Lord and the Bible, they often find that here. And I encourage people to find a Bible believing church. You can ask all the questions and read the creeds and, find out what people say they do, but go and attend and see if that's what they're living out and see if that's actually what is being taught. Are they going to Scripture to say those things so that we can build each other up in the Lord? So let's begin with how you became a Christian. How did you come to know the Lord? And how old were you, and what were the things that happened to lead up to that?
Okay. Well, uh, let's see. The beginning is not where I came to the Lord, but how I followed a friend. Um, my best friend in our church was 8 years old, and her grandfather was the pastor. And so she decided that she needed to follow Jesus, and so I followed her. And we walked down the aisle same day. I think we were even holding hands, but I had no understanding except that it was the right thing to do. And but there was no change in my life. I just continued to make poor choices, and it wasn't that I was a radical life. It was just poor choices. I knew that I had to maintain good grades. I had to do this. We went to church every Sunday morning, every Sunday night, and every Wednesday night. I was involved in quite a few things, and I was really a good faker. People probably thought, oh, yes, she's a Christian. She goes, but that's not how my life. And then when I hit teenage years, very bad choices. And the good news is that I chose to still follow my mother because she was the only one in our house that went to Christ, that went to church. And uh, my sister had already left home, and my father never attended church, but he expected you to attend church. And it was in our household, do as I say, not as I do. And so I went to college at ETSU, and when I came here, more poor choices. And then one night, some friends of ours, they decided to go to a concert. More poor choices. And I went to this concert, and I was on a second level of the concert hall. And the person who had traveled with us, he passed out, and he fell forward, and he knocked me forward. And we were on the second level, and so I started to fall over the banister. But luckily, my friends around me were well enough that they could pull me back quickly. But in that instant, under all the things I'd heard, Christ had planted the seed. And I knew that if I died that moment, I would have never gone to heaven because I didn't know him as my Lord and Savior. So I went home that night and I couldn't sleep. And the next morning, I encouraged my mother, we got to go to church. We got to be at church on time. And, she was like, well, you always go to church. So what's new? But I said, no, I got to be on time today and I got to go. And I almost ran down the aisle that time because I had to tell him that I did not know Christ. And I accepted Christ. And the thing my father said most about that, and it's one of the most cherished words I have of him, is that he said, the thing that happened with Penny was the real thing. He said, because what a change in her life. And there wasn't many things I could keep as those pearls, but he left that pearl for me then. So
That's beautiful.
Phew.
That's beautiful. Um, you know, you don't think of things like that being a near-death experience, but it was realistically back in the 80s. They didn't have, maybe some of the cautions that they might have now, right? But you said it was in maybe during this 80s that happened.
Yes. I was 20. I was 20 years old.
Okay, and so that real experience where you quickly realized that you were not ready to die got your attention. I love that even someone who did not know the Lord saw the change in your life, and that was very real. And tell us a little bit about your father didn't come to church with you, but he had expectations. What was your relationship with him?
My father was an alcoholic, but he was a weekend alcoholic. He rarely drank during the week, but on the weekend, he usually started on Friday afternoon and would not sober up until Sunday. Unfortunately, he also chose to cheat on my mother. And so there were many weekends he wouldn't be there, or he'd only be there partly. But I'd always been a daddy's girl, and I would always defend him with my mother and my sister when they were there. And when I actually heard the conversation between him and another person, and I realized that he was cheating on my mother, it was heartbreaking. And there were a lot of things that occurred and happened that were difficult as a teenager. A lot of times, one of the conversations that my sister always likes to bring up is that my brother-in-law asked me, he said, I want you to say why you want to go to school. Why are you going to ETSU? And he was waiting for this glorified, because I want to be a teacher, and I did want to be a teacher, and I want to, and I looked at him straight in the eye and said, "'Cause I get to get away from my father." And,
So this gave you an opportunity to get out of the house
mhm,
and be away from the chaos and the stress that he created.
mhm,
I understand that it's logical and it's also self-preserving
mhm.
in a positive way. Um, did you then see and pursue Christ as you were in college?
That's where I made the big mistake. I decided to do the same thing as my father and make unbelievable poor choices. And so, I didn't come to him until to Christ until I was 20. That's when that occurred. So for 2 years of my college, it was no, it was just but I went to class every day. I had to maintain the grades because I knew he would pull me out if I didn't maintain my grades. So AB on a roll, AB on a roll. I mean, I could always fake it. I was a very good faker.
Mm.
And so, I maintained it, and then, like I said, then when the situation with the friends and, uh, that's when I changed complete route.
I love that you have clarity in seeing that you were faking,
Mhm,
that you were pretending,
mhm,
because I think sometimes we lie to ourselves so much
mhm,
that we don't even realize we're faking. We're not willing to accept that. So that is good insight for you to be able to turn from what you were doing,
mhm.
because otherwise you think it's all okay
Yeah.
and you think everyone's believing this act that you're putting on. Um, I love that something like almost falling to your death could shake you into the reality of I need Jesus and I've got to live my life authentically. I can't pretend because it's
Mhm.
doing no one good, right?
Well, ultimately, it was part of his plan. I mean,
Mm,
everything's part of his plan.
sure.
Even going to church and not for almost 20 years and not, accepting him was part of his plan. But I would have never met Mark either. And he had already accepted Christ. He was walking the path. He would have never dated me as the person I was. The other thing that always amazes me is I got so upset because my boss would make me work on Sunday nights, and I would come back, and I started waiting on this group of, young, college and career group from a church, and there was this guy that was just so goofy and always cutting up and so silly, and, you know, I would have never met him if it hadn't been I had to work on Sunday nights because 'cause I'd have to go to church with my mom on Sunday morning and then run back to Johnson City on Sunday night to work. So, again, he
A-
knew who he had.
And that was after you had become a Christian.
Yes, yes, because matter of fact, after when I became a Christian at age 20, my mom and I would walk, and we walked a lot, and I told her, I said, "There are no Christian men my age. They're either married or they're not Christians." And she goes, "Penny, please stop. Pray about it." That was her words of wisdom all the time. You need to pray about it.
And she knew how important that was, and I guess you pulled back and could see that choosing a Christian mate was
Mhm.
important after the things that you
Mhm.
had seen and walked through. Uh, I would like for us to go back and let you tell us a little bit about your life living in the house with your father as he um, was choosing to have another life with another with other women.
Okay.
Would you tell us a little about that?
Sure. Um, my father would, like I said, he would be on and off with the same woman, one of the same women. But the problems were, and that my mother wanted to stop him, and she felt like she could. And so there were many times, even at a young age, I remember getting in the car and going to look for him. And there were times when, I remember she would put his clothes in a black bag, and when she found his car, she'd open the trunk and put his clothes in the back of the car. Uh, there were times when would take my sister and I looking for him and even take his car, and he would be left there and then have to be. And so, it was difficult watching that, and it was just there was such horrific language. Um, and my mom just felt like she really believed that he would change and she loved him and that she was going to, things were going to work out. Um, there were many times throughout my life that, as I said, my father said, do as I say, not as I do. And I was driving at this time, but I came home from work. I mean, excuse me, I borrowed the car. I'd already worked that day. And our rule on the weekend was you had to be home before 12 o'clock. I came home at 12:05, tried to sneak in the house, and he was on the couch waiting for me and just blasted me. And, are you drinking? Are you doing this? Are you doing that? And all of a sudden I said, it was hard for me to hold back and say, well, look who's calling the kettle black. But
Mm.
I said, what does it matter? He said, you follow the rules of my house or you leave. And so he told my mother, he said, she's out. So at age 16, I went to live with my sister for a week. And my mother really thought that during that time, he would come to a realization, and I would come to a realization and then she told me bluntly, you've got to follow the rules. You've got to. So I lived with my sister for that 1 week. And it wasn't that it was set a week, but it started out just, you're going to go. And then on Friday, he told my mom that I could come home. And so she said, you've got to apologize, which was difficult because I was like, I did nothing different. She said, he's the adult. You're not. You broke rules, more rules, and you've got to apologize. And so I did. And I came in, and no, he did not apologize to me. He just said, you know the rules. And I said, yes, I do. And so that was pretty much the end of that situation. It only happened once, but I knew then there was only certain things I could cross, and if I crossed any further, it would affect what would happen.
And it's interesting that you said that you were daddy's little girl,
I had been.
yet he still had those rules set up
Mhm.
that were in his mind that you didn't
Mhm.
cross, even if you were the one that was special. And which gives you some insight to maybe your mom's relationship as well.
Mhm.
And how those things were already set up for her to explain to you that there's only certain things that you can do, that rules that you can break. That is stressful. Wow.
Mhm.
That's a hard place to be every day and trying to live out your life and knowing that there's expectations there within your home that may be difficult or unfair or not set up for fairness in any way or love or concern for you. Thank you for sharing that. So, as you move forward in your life and being in college, you find out more about his life. And can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes. My father continued drinking, and he was still having this affair. And so I found out that when I was in college, that I had a sister the exact age of me, and she lived in the same dorm, and she lived across the hall from me. No, I take that back. I apologize. She lived upstairs in the room that was been, and so that was just overwhelming. And the way I found out was at lunch one day when we were all there, and she came by and put a picture of her in the mailbox, and then that was the discussion topic when we were all eating, and I just was overwhelmed because I thought I had never met her. Um, I never did meet her. She died, and she, and then when he died, I found out that I also had a brother, and, by the same woman. I really thought there were many women, and it was almost like, no, there may have just been one main person.
So it's almost like he had a
Mhm.
double life,
Mhm.
really, another family that he was. So when you saw this picture, did she look enough like you that you
I
could
never
tell?
saw the picture.
Okay.
My mother would not let me see it.
Hmm.
She said, "There is no reason, and you don't need to know who it is." And, um, just like with the dorm, I did not find out about the dorm until we no longer lived in the same. I only lived in that dorm 1 year, and I wasn't told till the 2nd year, and that's when everything came through, and I said, "She lived in Carter?" And she said, "Yes." She said, "But you didn't need to know that." My mother tried to prevent further hurt. Of course, there's so many questions like, "Why did you take me along?" And that's where it caused some problems with mom and I,
Can I?
taking me.
Yes. Can I ask you real quick as you pause to say, do you think that helped you for you not to know that this girl was your stepsister? Do or do you resent that and wonder if you could have had a relationship with her?
I have very mixed feelings. That opportunity has passed. And at that time, I chose not to have a relationship. And I have regrets for the fact that I blamed her for something she had nothing in. And what's amazing, and I will say this, wow, I do believe she's in heaven because if it's by her actions, I don't know her personally, so I couldn't say that. But if her actions reflected her love of Christ, she took care of him in his last days. And wow, that takes a forgiving heart because he was never really a part of her life
Hmm.
until my parents got divorced when I was 26.
Yeah. That's really insightful and kind-hearted of you
Mhm,
towards her
mhm,
to recognize that he was not the easiest person to be around, much
mhm,
less care for in that way, and for her to give as much as it takes to care for others,
mhm,
which um, that it would take a lot. So you mentioned that your mom would take you along
mhm,
in these situations that kids should never have
mhm,
been placed in, and I guess um, she was desperate, and she was confident that she could get him out of this,
mhm.
and that her will would be done in all of this, right? So what were some of those experiences that you had?
I think the absolute worst, and I do I tried to use this when I was teaching, telling parents how much to expose their children to because it was not a good situation. I wish she had never taken me to those places. I think I would have believed. I mean, I found out on my own anyways, so but I think the most difficult time was, and because I heard the story so many times, was the night that, my mother was beat up by his girlfriend. And in my mind, I started weaving this story that I was there. But, I could tell you where they met that night, that it was in a parking lot, that she got out, that he kept holding the door and not letting me get out. And I believed that for years, even into adulthood. And then when I went through some counseling and I was never there because mom knew that where she was going, it was not going to be possibly a good situation. So she had dropped me off at my uncle and aunt's, and I'd been there. But the story kept being retold and retold to where I put myself there. And yes, he did stand there, and he did watch her get beat up. And it resulted in her being in the hospital, um, which was so difficult. Uh, but that and he did nothing. He didn't hit her, but he allowed people to hurt her.
Yes. So let's stay on that just a little bit more about how that, we think of as we're parents, protecting our children from seeing things that are destructive or, scary movies, things that could cause them to be scared, be anxious and worried in other situations of their lives. And I appreciate that you have a real life story that where we need to be cautious and protect our children from hearing adult things, and especially as consistently as I'm sure everyone came in and asked your mom, what happened? Why do you look like this? Why are you in the hospital? What went on? And in her desperation, her anger and hurt, she said those things, and no one would blame her for telling the things. But she did not protect your ears and protect your mind from the things that had actually happened. And I really appreciate that because there's times that you don't know. Like sometimes in your mind, you're thinking, was that okay for them to hear? Did they hear that? Were they in the other room? Um, and it is important as parents, as caregivers, as aunts and uncles, that we protect the kids that are around us from experiencing even the knowledge of things that they are not well equipped to even hear. Because later it may manifest in trauma that didn't actually have to have been part of their life. To have found that out years later in therapy that it it wasn't even possible for you to have been there, yet you lived that trauma and you experienced that. It's shocking, but it's also sad that you had not experienced that yet have felt the effects of it for years. That is very sobering. So thank you for that, for sharing that. So you did mention that you've had mixed feelings about that other family, and it makes me curious as to, I am such a curious person and asking all the questions. I want to know, like, did you know them? How much more did you see of them? Did you ever go into the grocery store and look around and say, that's got to be them? That's got to be the other family because you've put the pieces together. Were there ever experiences like that?
Well, unfortunately for her as well, she was raised by an aunt. She wasn't raised by her mother. And the son was never raised by his mother either. I don't know who raised, if it was the same aunt or a different aunt. So, and she ended up, they didn't live in Johnson City. So no, never saw or similar. And she ended up living in Knoxville. And so I never ran into her. She did reach out through my aunt, my father's sister, and asked if she could beat me. And at that time, I just couldn't. And I waited. And then she developed cancer and she died. And so sometimes if you miss an opportunity, at that time I was trying to protect my heart. But I didn't follow. I don't think I really followed God's will because I didn't want to seek him on that. It was one of those, yes, God, I do believe you have a perfect will, but I'm just not sure I want to know your will on this one. So I'm going to do it my way. And I found that every time I do it my way, I'm wrong in 99.999% of the time, because he does affect even when I think I'm doing my will. And sometimes he'll say, "Okay, you think this is yours, but you're gonna find out it's me." And then there's other times where he said, "Boy, you are just way off still." I think of Christ with the disciples and how frustrated he got that those men were with him daily, and he says, "Why don't you get it?" And I'm like, "Okay, I've been with Christ for 45 years. Why don't I get it at times?" But I still fail. But I'm so grateful that he says, "It's okay, child, come back.
Yeah.
You're always here."
Yeah. And even if you were not willing or able to forgive at that time,
Mhm.
he's forgiven you anyway.
Mhm. Mhm.
We can hold on to that. Um, I appreciate you talking about your weakness in that and how difficult and emotionally sometimes we think we're not ready for things, but God, if
Mhm.
he is willing to put you in those places, he has the strength that we can lean on when we feel too weak to do it.
Mhm.
And he also has abilities to heal those places within our hearts that we don't even recognize need healing. And so I hope that you are right, that she knew Jesus and that maybe that was why she pursued
Absolutely.
a relationship with you. And that's beautiful because one day you will know her.
Mhm.
And hopefully you have the same father,
Mhm.
the same godly father
Mhm.
in heaven. That is beautiful. So you mentioned that your father passed.
Mhm.
And so, you know, traditionally here, funerals are big events. Lots of people come out, lots of family. It is, and I say traditionally here because I have learned that that is culturally not always the way things are done in other countries. So, will you share a little bit about how that happened with this other family that was existed while you and your sister and your mother existed?
Well, at that time, my mother had been dead for 5 years.
Okay.
So, and, there was a difficulty between his family. A lot of them had already passed, and there were just of they weren't accepting of due to other part of them being of a different religion, and, so the way I found out about my father's death was, through a paper article in the newspaper,
Wow.
and I think my sister is the one that actually sent it to me, and she goes, "Call me after you see this." And so, when I read it, that's when I found out about the brother. So we had a discussion, I do believe the service is to help people, they're hurting. And so we made the decision we wanted to go, but not to interrupt or cause problems. So what we chose to do was they would start receiving friends around 5. So we went at 4. And when we walked in, we hadn't seen our father for quite a few years. And it was just such a, I mean, was so different because the man that was in there was not the man we knew. And, you know, um, I'm not sure about his salvation. There was a time that he came to church and at one time and then said that, he believed in Jesus, but yet he never came back for 26 years of my life. So I don't know what happened at the end. And there was nothing mentioned. So it was like looking at a stranger, someone that had such a full effect of your life, and then yet you had no relationship with any longer. And I just kept thinking, I don't want anyone to have to go through this. It's just so difficult you know, recognizing that we need Jesus.
That is a horrible experience, to see him that way, and as you see him aged so much, it really is right in your face,
Mhm.
how much time had passed since and the relationship was broken.
Mhm.
But I see such humility on the part of you and your sister to have chosen to think of others' comfort in that time, to give them opportunity to grieve without the stress or drama of you being there, and what that could have created in a funeral and distracted people who needed to just have an opportunity to say goodbye and to comfort those that were around him. I just see that as such a kindness towards him and that other family.
Mhm.
And I bet they saw that too. I bet they understood. Because, we're all nosy and we look at that book to see who's been through that line.
That's so true.
So they saw that your name was there.
And yes, we did
Um,
sign because we want him to know that, uh, if nothing else, just respect.
that's good. And, no one would fault you for any decision that you made in that. But it sounds like you made a very honoring decision. And, the Bible tells us to honor our father and our mother. And I've tried to help people understand that that doesn't mean that we have to obey everything that they say when we are adults, because we get to make those decisions. But the things that we say and that we do can honor them, whether they seem to deserve the kindnesses that are extended to them or not. Um, and I see that as honoring him, even in his death. And, sometimes not being part of the things that he created could also be honoring to those people that are in his life, too, just to not create the drama. Because I think sometimes we just think they deserve to know. They deserve to know what they did to me. So there's peace also, even in the ambivalent feelings of whether or not you should or shouldn't have pursued a relationship in that. So, can we go back to Mark?
Okay.
So you meet. He comes to a restaurant that you are a server at, and he catches your eye because he's goofy and he loves Jesus.
Mhm.
Can you tell us a little more about that?
Oh my gracious. He I was 21. He was 24, and he would come in, and they always took one of my back tables and stay forever. And they loved to joke, and there were laughter, and it was just so neat. And he ended up going to he worked at Zell's in the mall, and one day one of the girls that came in, she was talking to him, and she told him where she worked, and he said, "Oh, there's a girl that works there. Her name's Pearl." And she goes, "Pearl? I don't think we have a Pearl." He goes, "Yeah, I'm thinking about asking her out. She's waited on us a couple of times." Well, she goes, and she was getting a ring and having it sized and everything, and then she came back. She goes, "There's no Pearl, but there's a penny." And he goes, "Well, maybe that's it." Now, what's sad about this is I wore a name tag. Wrote my name on every check that they got, and he still didn't know my name. And I have real good penmanship, and so I just could not understand that. So him and his roommate came in to sat one Saturday night, like a week after that, and sat at my station. And they said he asked me what I was doing tomorrow. And I said, "Well, I have to work tomorrow night." And he said, "Well, I said, "But I might could get off." And he said, "No, what I was wondering if you'd like to go to church with me in the morning." And it was just like, "Wow, this is different." And so I said, "Oh, sure." So, uh, we went to church, and I come to find out, new schedule came out, I didn't have to work Sunday night, and I thought, "Oh, I'll really get a chance to get to meet him." Well, first of all, he had to go to work, at Sunday, and right after he dropped me off, no dinner, no lunch, nothing, dropped me off, goes to work, and then he comes back over after, and we just sat and talked for hours and hours, and, such a gentleman. I saw the first time in my life how a man should treat a woman.
Oh,
And, so anyways, we started dating, and, uh, that was in 1981, and so, in 1983, on January 1st, I said, "So am I gonna get married this year?" And he said, "I don't know, are you?" And I said, "Thanks." So, but he did ask me in June, and, I knew that after that we needed to plan quickly, so, we planned and we got married in, November of that year,
wow.
23.
That's awesome. So I love that in your eyes, you were not just a penny, that you were worth more than pearls.
Thank you. Now, if
I
you ask him,
love
he'll always
that.
say, "I love my wife, but she's not worth 2 cents." I
Oh,
know. Can you believe that? But
you
again,
were,
that's his humor.
yes, yes.
Yeah,
Oh, I don't believe that for one
thank you.
second. It's the pearls.
Yeah, maybe that was a subliminal.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah,
For sure. I love that. And it's great that your first date was going to church.
yeah. Never had done that before.
Yeah, yeah. So he totally got your attention in
Mhm,
that.
mhm,
That's so beautiful. I love that. And I love that God had plans for you
mhm,
to see how a woman should be treated
mhm,
and that you were willing to accept that. Um, Too often women don't see their worth and don't recognize that that is what God has for them and that we are the beautiful daughters of Christ, and he loves us so much. He has good for us.
mhm,
And it's hard for some women that have never seen that to
mhm,
accept that that is something that they will feel comfortable in
mhm,
because that's not what they've heard. That's, you mentioned the language that was so bad and, the being mistreated so much. I'm grateful for the Lord to have changed your heart and for him to show you the good and have good for you and his goodness. Penny, I have loved hearing your testimony. Is there anything else that you would like to share that we didn't discuss? Is there something else about your testimony that we need to hit?
I'm just so grateful that, when you're reading a book, that last chapter, you think, "Well, this is the end," and it's so sad. But it just seems like he just adds another chapter, another season to our life, and he makes things so bright. And, I think of our RCG, we have a mantra, and anything that, myself and PJ send out, we always put, "Remember, we're just walking each other home." And that's how I truly feel. I'm so grateful for all the people that I know that are helping me walk my way home.
That's beautiful. Beautiful because what part of this podcast is creating community and helping us to know that there are people around us who've walked through some hard things, who have had absent fathers, who have had seen horrible traumas that you think this has wrecked me. How can I have a life beyond this? And you're here to say, God can clean up all the mess
Mhm.
and he can give you someone who helps create a place that is loving and caring as we walk together to him and home. I love that. That's beautiful. Thank you so much, Penny.
Thank you.
I treasure our time together. I treasure our friendship and just the opportunity to share alongside of you and walk with you in this. Thank you for sharing your story for his glory.